morning and welcome to American Literature. I hope everybody's excited and ready to get started this morning. We're going to start a brand new unit today, Unit 4, where we're going to be looking at the American mythology. And one of the stories we're going to pay particular attention to is Rip Van Winkle. Hey everyone! This isn't actually my American Literature course. This is my presentation for Assignment 4 for Instructional Design and Assessment at Fort Hays State University in Kansas. I thought it would be kind of interesting and fun to invite y'all into my virtual classroom. This is what my students see when they enter the room each day for our courses. For this assignment, I decided to focus on my below basic learners and those are students that struggle with reading comprehension, writing skills, or maybe they're struggling to even learn the American language at this point in time. Anyway, when they come into my classroom, I always have a screen that's very similar to this. It has the unit that we're working on, the date, some instructions to get them started, sometimes an interesting picture. Sometimes I have a chat prompt where they will respond to a question in the chat, and it's usually something to deal with the unit we're working on. And I also always remind my students with this right here, letting them know that this is a recorded session and it is being recorded for learning purposes. I guess you can kind of say that's what I'm doing here. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in and get started and see how this looks in a virtual world as we walk through assignment number 4. All right, so the goal of Unit 4 for my students in American Literature is this. It is so Unit 4 is for creating an American mythology to help students master skills needed to write literary critiques of 3 paragraphs, which will include an introduction, body paragraph, and a conclusion. The instructional model that I chose that I thought would really fit best with this is the ADDIE model, because following this format of analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation, I think it really works well with the group of students that I'm targeting with these lessons. They were all given the MAP test, MAP reading assessment, at the beginning of the year, and based off of their RIT scores, it was determined that they're either struggling readers or writers. And usually if you're a struggling reader, you kind of struggle a little bit with your writing skills as well. Not always, but most of the time. So when I'm working with these students, I'm always looking at what they're turning into me, kind of a formative thing, what they're turning in, what it looks like, and how do I need to adjust the next lesson to make sure that we're moving forward. Sometimes moving forward actually means we got to step back and look at something again and I have to figure out a way to reteach it. So with the ADDIE model, I think that really fits because it's a continuous flow of analysis, design, development, implementation, and then of course evaluation. So the learner objectives for this unit, my students will analyze the influence of mythic, traditional, or classic literature on American fiction, and they will write an essay using textual evidence to support the characteristics of American mythology found in works of mythic, traditional, or classic American fiction. Sorry, sometimes this stuff becomes a little bit of a tongue twister. The ISTE standard I chose for this assignment is 6, the facilitator, and I chose 6B specifically because it relates to managing the use of technology and student learning strategies in digital platforms. And of course, my entire lesson for these kids is going to be in a virtual classroom in a digital platform. So that standard definitely seemed to fit best. All right, ready? Here we go. Let's move ahead. All right, assessment for this unit. The summative assessment is going to come from the final essay draft. And there is a small unit test, an online multiple choice test, that will deal with the content of the text that they've read. But the assessment for the goal that I wrote for the essay is going to be based off of their final draft. So like I said earlier, this is a group of students that score at a below basic learner level. And I got that based off of the MAP reading assessment, which we use to determine their comprehension of materials that they read. And then I further based their abilities off of responses to exit tickets and a Google form that has questions related to what we learned in class that day. And with those, I can take a look at their writing. Can they write a sentence? Are they using correct grammar? Are they using the right mechanics? So I get a better idea of what their writing skills are, and that leads me into how I can design lessons for these students that are going to target their abilities, and we can start showing that 1 year's growth that I'm going to have to demonstrate through all my summative assessments and through all my data at the end of the year. All right, so before I can design my lesson, and as I design my lesson, I keep in mind what materials we're going to have access to and what we're going to need to make this all work. So for these two particular lessons, the materials we're using are textbook. Now my students have both an online version and a paper version of their textbooks, which comes in real handy. This is the paper version that we use. The exact same book is online in two digital formats that the students can download to a mobile device, or they can actually just read online. Computers are necessary. Everybody has their own computer. Students either use their personal computers or they're provided a school computer. School computers are provided to students who fit in the free and reduced meal plans if they were to go to a brick and mortar school. If they fall in that criteria, then they get a school-provided laptop. They will need a Word document. The Word document will be turned in to a submission Dropbox at the end of all of this for the grade, and it will have their essay. They, of course, also have to have an internet connection of some kind, and we always ask that they have a backup plan. I have a backup plan. If my internet goes down, I link to my hotspot on my mobile phone. For my students, that might mean they have to rush off to a library, Starbucks, or somewhere that provides free internet. And then, of course, we're also using the Blackboard Collaborative Classroom. And that's where we're at right now as we go through this whole lesson and this assignment. All right, so our activities, we're going to read Rip Van Winkle and highlight examples of the characteristics of an American mythology. And then my students will participate in a group activity. And then we're going to write a thesis statement in class together. And yes, I'm going to just basically tell them, write this, fill in the blank. Because at the level of these students, they really, really need that almost like an algebra formula of how they're going to write things. So that's kind of what I have them doing with that. In future activities and future lessons, we will draft, revise, edit, and publish a final copy of the essay. And by publish, that means turn it into the submission box. All right, so the media and technology that we will be using, we'll be using our online public school, our LMS system that comes with that, the BBC Synchronous Sessions, which includes learner tools. For this one, we're mostly going to use the polling tools of Give Me a Green Check, but they will also use whiteboard tools. They will be able to use the microphone in their small groups, along with the chat and whiteboard privileges that allows them to write on the whiteboard. And then, of course, they will be using their online textbook if they choose to. In the group activity, they can use the online textbook to take a snapshot of the quotes that they might use in their notes when they write for their paper. Alrighty, I gotta grab a drink of water really quick, y'all excuse me. As you can tell, the classroom environment online is pretty casual. Not a whole lot of formal stuff. But yeah, we keep it pretty casual. It's pretty chill for the kids. If they need to get up and move around, they can. If they need to use a restroom, they can. If they need to go grab something to drink, let the dog out. Or in the case of a lot of my students, go take care of the baby. They can do that. It's one of the definite advantages of the online school system. All right. So before I always start a lesson, the first thing my students, well, after they see the initial slide when they come in the room, the first thing we do is we talk about our agenda for the day, and we take a look at our pacing guide and what they're going to have coming up for the week. This is in a digital format in the LMS system. They can download a copy of it. If things change and things adjust, then I can always upload a new copy of the pacing guide, and it sends out an announcement to all of my students letting them know that a new document's available and they need to look at it. So today, as you can see, well, actually Monday, when the kids come into class, they are going to see this slide right here. It is going to tell them our agenda. We're going to work on creating an American mythology, read Rip Van Winkle, and then always at the end of class, I have time for questions, and then I always have our standards-based objectives listed for them as well. All right, as I said, we're looking at a unit that's dealing with mythology. My students are all, their background knowledge, they all have a little bit of knowledge about Greek mythology and Norse mythology and the stories that are associated with that, but it's very rare that you hear about an American mythology. So that's what this unit is kind of doing for the kids, and looking at the texts that make up our American mythology and the characteristics that are found in all of them. So that's a little bit of background information. What we did next, before we start writing our paper, my students needed to read Rip Van Winkle. And for a student that's struggling at reading, this is a bit of a difficult text. It has a lot of words that are not used by young people today. So it has a lot of things in there that they're not familiar with. And it's also in a place that a lot of my students have never traveled to. The kids that I work with, they are all over the state of Kansas, but a good deal of them have not traveled very far from their home. And the story does take place in New York, in the Catskills, and it deals with a time period and a place that most of them are not very familiar with. So as we go through, there's a lot of explanation as we're reading the text to help the children understand what, well, I guess not really children, they're high school, but to really help them understand what they're reading. So what we did prior to getting ready for writing this essay, we read through our story, and I gave the kids, this is what the screens looked like, I gave the kids the characteristics that they would find in the mythology, and then we would read one page at a time. And this took a while. We had to kind of skip around a little bit, and then they did have to read a little bit over the weekend for their homework. Hopefully they did. And I'll talk about this more in my reflection, but this is something next semester or next year when I do this again, I'm definitely going to have to take a different approach to reading. Anyway, what we did is we went through and we found examples of each of these characteristics. So here you can see they found an example of the first characteristic, said in the past, often in remote and exciting places and times. On another page, we found examples of the characteristic feature incredible, heroic, impressive, magical, or mysterious events and their consequences, and an example of filled with remarkable, strange, or exaggerated creatures. And on this page, more characteristics of the characters. And then finally, we found a couple of examples to convey a positive message about a nation and its people. Now, when we did this in class, the students have access to the whiteboard tools, and they can go through and highlight. So what I would do is I had the kids use the raise your hand feature in the Blackboard classroom, and they would raise their hand, I'd call on them, and they'd take a whiteboard tool and highlight the example. But this took a lot longer than I anticipated. All right, the last thing we did before we finished the class where we're reading the story is, well, no, actually, this was the last thing we did, but it was also the first thing we did in our whole group session a week ago Monday. We went over the assignment they were going to have for this unit. In our small group, I told them they were going to only have to write 3 to 4 paragraphs. The instructions want 5 paragraphs, but because these, again, are below basic learners, we're going to focus on writing 3 paragraphs. I do challenge them to write 4 paragraphs, which would mean taking an extra characteristic and writing another paragraph about that. They're only required to focus on 1 characteristic. Again, the challenge, take on 2 characteristics. All right, so part of what I did for the first lesson is I took the flow chart that I put together for this assignment, for assignment 4, And what I want the students to do is I want them to choose one characteristic that really stood out to them while we were reading or while they finished reading the story on their own. And I want them to write that characteristic in their notes. They should have a Word document open, or maybe they like to take their notes old-fashioned and they have a spiral notebook, a piece of notebook paper, whatever format they use to take their notes. They have to choose one of these characteristics and write it down in their notes. Then what they have to do is they have to write their name under their choice on the whiteboard. So again, they're going to grab whiteboard tools. Some of them will use the pen and they'll actually write their names. Other students will use the typing tool and type their names. And then still some others, even though I encourage them not to, will drag and place their name from the list of participants over here on the left-hand side. Once they've all gotten this completed, I'm going to have them go into what are known as breakout rooms, where they're going to work on a group activity together. And each of the rooms are going to have a slide like these, and each one has the characteristic that the students chose. So they're going to be placed in breakout rooms according to the characteristic they chose in this activity here. Once in that room, they're going to work with the students in that room to find an example of this text, or I'm sorry, of this characteristic in their textbook. And I'm going to encourage them to use the online textbook because they can simply grab a screenshot of that quote and then paste it onto the screen. They're each going to be responsible for finding 2 quotes. Although technically when they write their paper, they only need 1. But I don't have to tell them that. They don't know that they only need 1 quote. If I let them think they need 2 quotes, they'll actually go find 2 quotes. If they think they only have to find 1 quote, that's all they're going to find is 1 quote. So what I want them to do in their group is I want them to find their quotes, and then before I pull them in back into the main breakout room together to share what they found, I want them to kind of talk with each other in their group. Do these quotes really work as an example of this characteristic? Now, to give you an idea of what I'm dealing with, I have 46 students in this below basic reading group. Currently enrolled in the American Literature course, there are roughly 225 students. I might lose a couple of students next week because they haven't fulfilled the requirements to be in the online school. But anyway, there are 46 students out of that roughly 225 students that are in the below basic students group. On average, I have about 32 of those students who show up to live sessions. And it can be more or less depending on what they've got going. In this group of students, every one of them are on an IEP or a 504 plan. So they do have modifications and accommodations that I have to meet for those IEPs and 504s. And so mostly what I do in here kind of really hits every one of their IEPs and the 504 plans and the accommodations that are required. For this activity, there will be 3 breakout rooms per characteristic because I don't want any more than 4 students in the room. Now, nobody is going to be allowed to work alone. So if I see one of the breakout rooms only has 1 person in it, I'm going to move that person into a breakout room with other individuals. If I find more students, I have more students, say more of my students choose characteristic 1 than I have breakout rooms, I can very easily and quickly create another breakout room for those additional students and have them move into that room. What's really cool about these breakout rooms, I do have the ability to let my students move themselves, or I can, if I didn't feel like having them choose their characteristic, I could choose it for them and just simply put them in the breakout rooms by having them evenly distributed to the breakout rooms. I like to give them choice. I want them to write about something that they would feel more comfortable writing about, and one of the characteristics that makes more sense to them. So that's kind of how that part of the activity is going to work. Then I will return all of my students to the main breakout room, and I will also have their slides from their breakout rooms copied to the main room. And what we're going to do with most of the remaining small group time and I have a feeling this will carry over into our next small group time. They're going to discuss the quotes that each student found, and they're going to decide if these quotes are good examples for the characteristic. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because the kids are going to have to explain how these quotes are actually examples or good examples of these characteristics. So my thinking with this activity is if they're discussing it together in the classroom, it's going to help them really write that explanation sentence or two in their paragraphs that show this is a good example to support the characteristic. Okay. Once they get done with this activity, like I said, it might have to carry on to the next small group time, and that's okay. Once they do finish this activity, we will begin writing our thesis statement, and that is the second lesson required for assignment 4. Okay. All right, so let's jump in and look at that. So the writing a thesis statement, again, I'm going to use my flowchart that I created for assignment 3. Yeah, assignment 3. Sorry, it's been a long week already and it hasn't even started. Anyway, this was the flowchart I created. So I broke that down into step 1, step 2, and step 3 for my students. And really what I'm doing, in step 1, we're opening up our Word document and we're reviewing our notes, okay? So I have my students open up their notes. They have a screenshot. They would have been instructed before we finished all of this to get a screenshot of the quotes they used and put that in their notes. So they'll look at those. They'll make sure they know what characteristic they're looking at, read their quotes, and then I want them to think about why are your quotes good examples of the characteristic. And then they're going to give me a green check when they're ready to move on to step 2. Okay, and they do that. If you look over here, they can give me a green check for yes, I'm ready, and a red X for no, I'm not. But in this case, I've only asked for the green check. So everybody will give me a green check. That green check will appear by their name. And what's really cool about this, I can keep it anonymous by just checking this right here. Make responses. Can't talk. Sorry. Make responses visible. When I take that check mark away, I'm the only one that can see who is ready to go. Anyway, in step 1, we've done that. Step 2, they are going to see this screen right here. And on their Word document, if they have this characteristic, they are going to type exactly this right here. The same for each characteristic. I have a phrase for them to write. And this is going to be the beginning of their thesis statement. Now, if they have one of these 2 characteristics, there is a little bit of an additional step. It's like step 2.8. They have to go in here and choose one of these words to fill in the blank, or in this case of the last one, 2 of these words to fill in the blank to complete step 2. In step 3, we are going to finish our thesis statement by stating what you are going to prove. So they're going to answer the question, what is your main idea? Okay, so we've got our sentence here, and they're going to add this phrase right here, and impacts the story by, and then they're going to explain how their characteristic impacts the story. All right, and then basically and I'll explain to them, it impacts the story by what effect does it have on the reader. Okay. And of course, they're going to struggle with this part a little bit because they do have to use their critical thinking skills to come up with this. But because I'm working with them in this small group, I can help them one-on-one. I can create a breakout room and move kids in there that are struggling with this. I can also pull up a white screen like this and just have everybody copy and paste their thesis statement to the whiteboard, and we can work together. Nobody knows who the thesis statement came from, but we can work together and edit each other's thesis statements to help everyone come up with a strong thesis statement. So from there, my students are then going to go on. We'll create our next lessons will focus on writing an introduction paragraph. Then we'll write our body paragraph and then our concluding paragraphs. All right, I know this is getting kind of long, and I do apologize for that. Hopefully it was a little more interesting than reading my paper. But from all of this, my evaluation, I know we're supposed to do the actual lessons, but those start next week. So I didn't actually get to do the lessons, but based off of just what I've come up with, putting this together for my video here, based on the reading exercises and on an email from a confused student, I may have to step back a bit and spend more time on comprehension of the story. That's going to be definite. There was not enough time in class to read much of the story and discuss the literary elements and main ideas, leaving my students to read the remaining pages on their own. Scary. I will have a better assessment after we discuss the story and begin looking at the characteristics. To allow more time for the essay, I am going to delete 2 other readings from Unit 4 and target instruction to focus on comprehension strategies. Next semester, and possibly with the remaining units this semester, I am going to reduce the amount of readings in units that require a writing assignment. Looking at my current pacing guide, I could modify the schedule and reduce the amount of reading, giving me more opportunities to utilize my 30-minute small group sessions for targeted instruction and still hit the required standards and provide enough evidence of student growth. All right, guys, again, thank you so much for bearing with me. You kind of get a little idea of what it's like in a virtual online classroom. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some ideas that might work and help you in creating virtual assignments for your students in the brick and mortar schools. And I think one of my takeaways that I hope everybody walks away with is how can I use what you saw me present to you with some of your virtual assignments. And I also would love some feedback from you on what you thought of what it would be like to school in a virtual world. Anyway, again, thank you so much for watching this. And it was great being in class with y'all this semester. Thank you. Thank you. You guys have a great day and a great rest of the year. And good luck. Bye.